Warning.
Warning.
Warning!
Now for a word of caution.
The information you are about to hear is the exact knowledge they don't want you to know and may not be what you're expecting. Some listeners may experience discomfort and difficulty digesting the following content. Others may experience dramatic improvement in mood, mindset, and overall sense of inner self. Now, it's time to turn it up and tune in with us as we dive deep into the difficult topics and discussions that we've all been avoiding, made available for all to hear. Only on the Bridge Podcast, hosted by Travis Haley.
Matt Salmon.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for joining me today on the Bridge.
So great to be here. Thanks a lot. I feel like a kid in a candy store, actually.
Well, again, so our listeners kind of understand more about you. You're running for governor.
I am.
You're former AT state senate, right? And
Right.
then you did 5 stints as a congressman.
5 terms as a congressman,
Terms.
2 stints. I was there from 95 to 2001, and I'd taken a term limit pledge, so I left after 3 terms. And then I came back in 2013 to 2017. So total of 5 terms.
Okay. And then you left that, and then you went on to the ASU. You did government.
I was the head of government and community engagement. I was the vice president of government and community engagement. I did that for 4.5 years, and I left them not quite a year ago.
Okay.
And now I'm running full time, and my wife is the breadwinner.
Yeah. That's awesome. I know what that's like. So now you're back on the campaign trail. How does that feel? It's got to be so much different nowadays than I assume it was, 10, 15 years ago.
Social media has changed everything. People can say anything they want and not have to back it up with any facts. That's really different. But the meeting people face to face and shaking hands, that's the same.
Same.
And
always.
I've been going all over the state. In fact, this last week I've been to Tucson a couple times. I've been to Casa Grande. I've been to Williams, Flagstaff. I've been to Globe. I've been. That song, "I've Been Everywhere, Man." That's
Sure.
what I've been. I've covered every square inch of Arizona in the last year.
Wow. And you're going to continue to do that? I
Oh
assume?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'm all over the
Good.
place, and it's great because this is a big, beautiful, wonderful state, and a lot of the folks that live in rural Arizona, they don't think that the policymakers really care much about all the people that live outside of Metro Phoenix. And, the governor has to be the governor of the whole state.
Yeah.
And so it's really important that you get out and you learn, what's important to Yuma, what's important to Prescott, what's important to Globe, and they're all different.
Well, I think it's a good place to start. What's good for you? What do you believe in?
What do I believe in?
Yeah.
I believe that government's primary role is to protect our freedoms. I believe that the Constitution is very, very clear that the number one role of our government is to protect us from our government and to protect our unalienable rights, which are given from God Almighty above. And I believe that those rights and freedoms are in jeopardy right now. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be doing this because I need another political job like a hole in the head, to be honest with you. It's hard work, and every time you do something, half the public hates you. You cast a vote, half the public likes you and half the public hates you. It's a lonely job when you got to be a leader and you got to try to do what's right. But it's never been more important than right now. Ronald Reagan said that freedom's always just one generation away from extinction. And every time I give a speech, I say, let's make a blood oath tonight, not on our watch.
Yeah. I always grew up with the statement that if there's going to be trouble, let it be now in my time, so that my children maybe. I think Thomas Paine said that, right?
Yep, he did.
So I've wondered about that. Like I think you are now. Is like, well, did my father say that? Did my grandfather say that?
I think they did.
They did.
When I think about my mom and dad, Tom Brokaw called them the greatest generation. My mom and dad grew up during the Great Depression, and then my dad went off to fight against the Japanese in New Guinea during World War II, and they truly did leave me a better America than they inherited, I believe. In fact, I know. And I don't know that I can say that right now. I really do believe that, there's a song I learned when I was a kid, and it's called Freedom Isn't Free. And it's not. You got to sacrifice always to fight to keep the freedoms that we enjoy so much. And if you're not always vigilant, if you're not always on your toes, if you're not always doing everything you can to defend freedom. And here I am telling you, somebody's defending freedom since you were a kid. But my role right now is a different role. And I see the federal government trying to usurp more and more authority for the states. And that's not the way our founding fathers figured it. They figured that the states actually had more power. That's why they put the 10th Amendment in there. And I believe that we need a leader of the state that's willing to stand up when the federal government tries to jam stuff down our throats that we don't agree with or we know is unconstitutional. That we stand up and we say that's not going to happen in our state, and I'll fight you about that.
How do we get people to realize that? And like you said, the 50% that love you and then the 50% that hate you. That's the way the world works, but that's what's getting worse in my opinion.
It is getting worse because it's getting more and more polarized. I think part of it is just getting out and letting people kick the tires a little bit on you and see what you're all about. And I think that, there's an old adage that I learned as a kid, and it's I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. Right. And I think that ultimately, if people believe that your heart's in the right place and you're trying to do the right thing, even if they don't agree with you on policy, sometimes they'll forgive you. And they'll say, you know what, I think he's doing what he believes is the right thing to do, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But a lot of people in politics, they lick their finger and they stick it in the wind and they just try to figure out which way the wind's blowing. What if Abraham Lincoln had done that?
Right.
We'd be a much different country.
Well, that's unauthentic. It's counterfeit.
It is counterfeit, and I think leaders have a responsibility to lead. You're not just always trying to figure out where the public wants to be. Sometimes you have to lead where the public needs to be.
Yeah, there's a lot of risk and uncertainty in that.
It is.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of common enemy intimacy that happens as well. And if you ever heard that term, Brene Brown started talking about that a few years back, where you don't have to have anything in common with another person. Like, look at this whole situation. Look at racism. It's still an issue in the country, right?
Right.
And it is in certain aspects. But when I say, hey, look, I don't know you, but if you're going to talk crap about that other person, then do it next to me.
Right.
And that's this, we have nothing intimate in common except for that thing. And I think that's the byproduct of so much information in our world today, especially with social media and the way the media works, that it's created this.
But there's a lot of people out there that they make their way in life by just making things uneasy. They want to get offended at everything. They want to stir up trouble. I'm a problem solver, and I want to get out there and fix things so things are good for my family, my kids, my grandkids. I don't want to stir anything up. I just want to fix problems. Now, if I have to fight, I will, but I'm not looking for a fight. I'm looking to solve problems. If I have to fight in the process, I'll do it, but I'm not going to pick one.
Yeah. What are some of those problems you're fighting? What are the big issues that you're up against right now for this?
There's a lot of stuff that we're up against, but during COVID, we had government try to really, I think, put its thumb on people, and they used the term, science over and over and over again. And, some of our leaders here closed down business. I think that was a big mistake.
Yeah.
One of my dear friends is the governor of Florida, and they kept everything open, and they kept the schools open. And that's how I would have done things if I were governor. I would have kept the businesses going. I would have kept the schools open. Because when you say science and you're talking about public health, well, shouldn't you look at the whole spectrum? Mm-hmm. I mean, the idea when you close down businesses, people lost their livelihoods. They lost their jobs. Restaurants went under, and people committed suicide. People started using drugs again. People, the family, domestic violence went way up. That's all health too.
Yeah, our children are not the same.
Our children aren't the same. The kids that didn't have interaction with the kids. I have a little granddaughter. I say little. She's a junior in high school, and I apple in my eye, but she's dyslexic. And learning online was very, very difficult for her. And a lot of kids fell through the cracks. And I think it was a big mistake. If I'd been governor when this happened and the schools, the teachers said, well, we're not going to come to work, I would have been more like Ronald Reagan with the air traffic controllers. I would have said, you know what, you don't show up at work, you don't have a job. Because I believe it's that important. I think that, and again, I'm not trying to pick a fight, but I do believe that the leader of the state needs to make sure that everything in the state is there to help citizens and not to cause impediments for them.
I think the people of Arizona would agree with that.
I hope so.
Yeah.
And I hope even the teachers, because I said in a speech a couple of months ago that I thought that the teachers union was the scourge of our planet. And one of the liberal writers at the Arizona Republic came out and said, well, Matt Salmon hates teachers. I said, you totally missed the point, dude. I love teachers, but I don't like the teachers union. I think they've sold out teachers, parents, children time and time again.
Well, that was a quote I wrote down here that I saw. You made, there's a bunch of stuff on your website that states about the teachers, right, about the union. It says you want to bring a return on investment perspective to Arizona's education and workforce training programs to produce a gain to taxpayers that is higher than their initial cost. Can you? Can you explain that?
It's just common sense. Yeah, in everything that we do, we're spending, especially in government, we're spending money to do something. So the benefit should outweigh the cost, right? If we're spending money on education, then the outcome that we get from the educated students should outweigh the cost. It should, and I think it can, and we ought to be able to demand that of every government service.
Agreed. Yeah, hold them accountable. Okay. Border crisis. I know that's a big thing, too,
for you. It's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution says two things. It says every state shall be guaranteed a Republican form of government. And it also says that the federal government shall protect the states from invasion. Well, if we're not being invaded now, I don't know what it is. The cartels are controlling virtually every illegal activity at the border, whether it's smuggling people, sex trafficking, drug smuggling, gun running, you name it. It's all the cartels. And I believe that we have a responsibility as a state to protect our sovereignty. And I also believe that we have a responsibility to do everything we can to protect our citizens. And I don't think we're doing that. Besides putting the National Guard on the border, I believe that if the federal government's not going to do the wall, then we should do it. And yeah, is it going to be easy? Not at all. Because we got federal lands, we got Indian lands, we got a whole bunch of stuff to work around. But if it was easy, anybody could do it. I think that we have a responsibility to continue doing that. The other thing is there are folks breaking our laws that are coming across the border. They're not just breaking federal laws. They're breaking our laws, criminal trespass, and we should start arresting people. Senate Bill 1070, which was passed many years ago, most of it's still in effect. And and you know that, up close and personal, we should be arresting people that are breaking our laws here in Arizona. But what I'm told by a lot of the border sheriffs and folks out there is that we don't have the jail space. Well, one of the things the guy that you used to work for did that was really creative was created a tent city. We can do that again. And we can create the jail space for those people that are violating our laws. Yeah, and I think we need to do that.
You can't have those tent cities, though, because that's inhumane, and it's just a little bit less than the way the U.S. military is treated overseas. So we have to get rid of that.
I love the way you joke. The fact is, think about how they're treated by the cartels while they're being smuggled across the desert. Close to 60%. I understand, of the girls and the women that are smuggled across are raped by the coyotes.
Absolutely.
So there is a human rights crisis of epic proportions going on out there. And I got to tell you, I've been in the tent city. Mm-hmm. It's actually not horrible.
It's not. I'm joking. It's not. It's a good place.
Right.
It's rehabilitation.
I'll tell you what, for those folks that are crossing the desert, it's a darn sight nicer than that.
Well, I've literally found bodies in the desert before. I found a woman and a child holding each other that couldn't keep up, were murdered or something, and that happens a lot. And I know that a lot of people will look at these numbers of 6,000-7,000 people a day coming across the border. I think those are wrong, because if you sit out there and you go out at night, like I've done night operations with the military, I've done it with law enforcement. There could easily be 20,000 people a day coming across the border. I know it's 17,000 is the number they're throwing out. That's increasing right now, and it's worse.
But the numbers that they throw out are just the one number of apprehensions, and they haven't a clue as far as how many are getting by that aren't apprehended. And you know how the cartels work. Mm-hmm. I mean, on one side, they got 100 people coming across the border in Yuma, throwing up their hands saying, I want asylum. And then 3 miles down the line, they're smuggling people, they're smuggling drugs. While they're over here, CBP is over here processing everybody through asylum. They're over here on the other side, smuggling everything they can across. That's how they operate.
Yeah, and that drives me bonkers, because no matter what pathway we all have in life, I think we can all come to the same conclusion if we are reasonable people, right? That an open border is an issue.
It's a big issue, and if you're a country without a border, you're not really a country.
Yeah, and so why would the federal government, in your opinion, allow this to continue to happen?
I think there are a lot of reasons, and I'm very cynical. I think that people like Joe Biden think that the more people, because this is the way it works. People come across the border, throw up their hands, ask for asylum, they process them, they give them a court date, 90 days out or maybe even more. And you know what percentage of the people are actually showing up for those court dates?
Oh yeah,
1 or 2%. I mean, nobody. They just release them of their own recognizance out into the state and the country, and they go wherever. But they're gone. I believe that part of the reason that they're doing this is that they want to get people over here, get them on a track for citizenship, get them trapped in welfare, and then have loyal voters for the next.
You're going to have loyal voters.
Yeah. I mean, that's the cynical side of me. I think that's what's going on. It's the same reason that they want to declare Puerto Rico a state and they want to declare Washington, D.C. a state. They just want to try to run the tables.
And I think people would say, that's crazy. There's no way that somebody would do that for a monetary or positional gain.
I worked in the belly of the beast.
Right.
I know how some of these clowns think.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you that, I learned in my public service that there are really two kinds of people. There are doers and there are beers. You probably saw the same thing in the military. But the doers, they want to get stuff done. They want to change things for the better. The beers, they just want to be a congressman or be, an elected official, be a big shot. And unfortunately, the beers are about 90%. Mm-hmm. And that's sad. Yeah. And it's on both sides of the aisle. People that just want to be in office and they want to feel like they're big shots. And for some reason, that really floats their boat. The fact is, if you really saw it for what it is, being in public service is really, really hard. When I was in Washington, D.C., I was away from my wife about 80% of the time. We've been married 42 years, and I love her intensely. It was very difficult being away, and honestly, the reason I left was because all they wanted to do was play games on both sides of the aisle, and I got to the point I got better things to do. I didn't get beat when I left either time. First time I left because I made a term limit pledge. Mm-hmm. Second time I left, I just left because, you know what, I had better things to do than go back there and try to play games with a bunch of clowns that don't really want to solve problems.
Oh, I acknowledge you saying that because a lot of people wouldn't. And then I commend you for that because there's a lot of people that would cover that up, and we need people that are more authentic and can speak their mind, especially about these issues. And I think give some relevance because I think that goes back to the conversation of, well, okay, is it really that bad on the border? I live in Scottsdale. It's not.
It's really that bad.
I don't see it.
It's really that bad. When I've been to Yuma so many times, I've stopped counting, but they have people from 113 different countries that they've captured coming across the border. That frightens the heck out of me, and it should, everybody out there, because they're from countries of interest, mm-hmm. Like the Middle East, like Asia, and it's also a big national security threat. The other thing I didn't mention, but I will scream it from the rooftops. I will use my bully pulpit every chance I get to push our leaders to declare the cartels a terrorist organization. Because when we do that, we can take all the tools out of the tool belt to solve this problem.
Yeah, because they make ISIS look like Disneyland.
They do.
Mm-hmm. Especially with some of the CJNG cartels that are just lining up on our border with some of their hardware and weaponry and technology is better than any of the Border Patrol or ICE agents that they have.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
And you hear those stories from the CBP folks. And when I ask the Customs and Border Patrol people, officers, what do you need the most? Do you need more equipment? No, we need good policy. That's what they keep saying over and over again. Quit tying our hands and let us do our damn job.
Yeah. I think manpower can be a help on the front lines as well.
It could, and also, in the past, the environmentalist wackos will limit the spaces that the officers can actually work in, and we need to give them carte blanche. Yeah. Because when we decide not to patrol certain areas because of environmental issues, where do you think the bad guys are coming?
Of course. And if you have a section that's a long stretch of border that there's two agents on and they do apprehend somebody, they're 2-hour drive to a processing center the most time, and they're off that beat for 5 hours.
Right.
And the cartels, the RIP teams, everybody sits up.
They know exactly what's going on and how to abuse the system.
And I wish I could take Arizona or American citizens and take them to all the sites that we know of on the border and
Right.
show them how the cartels sit on our land, right down here, South Mountain.
I have watched them
And
glassing.
Laser systems, GPS,
I've looked
these
at
guys
them.
have retrans systems
Right.
for communications. It is out of control how technologically advanced they are. They're flying ultralights with up to 500 pounds of drugs on them and dropping them right here in Gila River Airfield. I've seen them do it at night myself with my own night vision.
Wow.
And it's like, why do the American people think that it's just
and that's what they have to understand is that this is a lot. The left would have you believe that the only people coming across are earnest, wonderful people that just want to come here and work hard and contribute. That's not a fact. Some of them are.
Yeah, some of them are.
Some of them are, but a lot of them have evil on their mind. Like one of my really dear friends, he lost his son, shot in the face by a guy that was here illegally over a pack of cigarettes. His name is Steve Ronenbeck. His son Grant was killed at a convenience store by a guy that was let out of jail for another crime, serious crime, and then he shot and killed Grant. This has been, probably 7 or 8 years ago, and that guy still hasn't been brought to justice. Now he's
Really?
Yeah.
Not a U.S. citizen.
No, not a U.S. citizen. Now he's been incarcerated, but they still haven't had the trial. Whatever happened to swift justice?
Yeah, I think that's the other thing is where people go, well, that's not my fight. That's the cops' fight. Well, what about a $480 billion child sex trafficking industry, which in the United States is now the epicenter, right?
And we're going to be having the Super Bowl soon, and that's going to be
that attracts.
And it's a big worry, and we've got to be on our toes. We have got to be on our toes, and the cartels are definitely an evil group of folks, and we ought to be doing everything that we can to thwart them and to stop them, and figure out how we can incentivize the Mexican government to work with us. We did it in Colombia. In Plan Colombia, where we basically overtook the cartels and moved them out of the country, but they moved to Mexico, and we've just got to find some Mexican leaders that actually have a conscience and a heart that we can work with. But it's going to take all of us working together to eradicate them from the earth.
Yeah,
and that has to be our goal. We have got to eradicate the cartels from the earth.
And eventually it will happen because every terrorist organization eventually pops.
Right.
And that's what we're letting breed right here next to us, which overseas we typically can cut that snake's head off pretty quick, even if it takes 20 years.
Right.
Right. And it's a whole different story. But I think that needs to start becoming in action, where military advisors need to start looking at this from a national security standpoint.
You have to.
It's not just about drugs and sex trafficking, which those are horrible,
they're
terrible
horrible things, but they're smuggling bad actors from other countries as well. Who knows what other terrorists are bringing?
Well, I'll tell you something that a lot of people don't know. If I said 9/11, I'm sure everybody out there listening, maybe even you, Matt, what's the first image that comes into your head?
Was watching the Twin Towers fall.
Right.
I remember I had just flown back actually from Siberia. I had come back the night before from a trip over to Russia, and I was on a treadmill, and I was watching the TV, and I thought it was a promo for a movie because it looked so outlandish.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't even comprehend in my head that was actually happening at the Twin Towers in New York City, but I was there when that happened. You want to hear another kicker? That whole day I was on Fox News as a commentator with John Hook and Carrie Lake.
Okay.
Life goes full circle, man.
Yeah. Well, I think if you ask everybody, they would say some similar answer like that. The plane hitting the building or the towers falling. Now, if you talk to an extremist Islamic terrorist that was a part of that situation, and I won't tell how I know this, but guess what the first thing they say?
What?
The Pentagon.
Oh, really? Yeah, because that's where the military strength is.
That's where a lot of us sit back and go, wait a minute, what do you mean the Pentagon? Why would you think of the Pentagon? They'll say, well, 3,000 plus people. That happens on a daily basis in our country sometimes. We took a box cutter and an airplane and did something to the heart of the United States military that the Russians and people in the rest of the world have tried for for 60, 70 years in the Cold War, right?
Right.
We did it just like that.
Right.
And so what that shows me is the insane cultural difference or thought process of how we go about this.
Wow.
And when you have interrogations and information that's come out of these people, and they'll tell you, like, yeah, we know 9/11 didn't work. And like, what do you mean it didn't work? Well, you guys went back to, you sang your pledges and you raised your flags and you came together and sang Kumbaya and for 6 months and then you went back to your daily life. So it didn't really work, right? That's what they think, regardless if it actually impacted us. And of course, if you know somebody at ground zero, which I do, or lost people in 9/11, it greatly affects you. But if you live in Kansas, if you live in Oregon, if you live in Colorado, and you didn't have a direct impact to your life,
it has a different impact.
It is different, right?
No,
it's
true.
different.
That's
so,
true.
So what happens there is, they say, well, wait till the heartland gets hit. So imagine a football game on a Friday night in Colorado or Kansas or Oregon or something like that. That's what scares me from my counterterrorism, experience in my life in the military and working in law enforcement, is that when you have open borders, you're allowing people to come in that can have these motives and actually execute them much easier. And it's harder for us in law enforcement or in the military to be able to track these things. Now, we have systems and processes for that, but when it's so overwhelming, when 20,000 people are coming across the border every single day.
There's no way to track it.
Yeah, and then you have 100,000 people that already died this year of fentanyl overdose.
Right.
Okay, that's a whole other conversation that nobody's wanting to have. So I think that's the big question.
And 92% of that fentanyl is coming over that border.
That's right. And that's right there. FA2, Focus Area 2,
right there.
From here to Gila Bend
Right.
That's the problem.
Right.
And so what I think people want to know, like, what does that look like in your term, and how do we?
Oh, I think it's all hands on deck. I mean, I think it's going to take the cooperation. So there's a border strike force that was established at DPS. There are different views on that, and we're spending a lot of money on that. But there's also, the border sheriffs in Yuma, Sierra Vista, and Nogales, Cochise and Nogales, and Pinal with Mark Lamb. Right. We need maximum cooperation with them. We got the National Guard. And I'm going to be actually releasing a very, very thoughtful plan in the not-so-distant future that includes all of those entities, because it's going to take all of them to work together to make sure that we create a barrier, okay?
Yeah.
The federal government keeps telling us you have no authority whatsoever when it comes to naturalization. Well, that's true. Constitution in Article 1, Section 8 gives Congress the authority for naturalization. Got it. But when it comes to protecting our own citizens and our own state and enforcing our own laws, we have a responsibility, and we're going to do it. And I think that if I am able to accomplish my goal, that will be to say Joe Biden may have put out a welcome mat for the United States. Doesn't apply to Arizona. Go to New Mexico, go to California, go somewhere else, because if you come here, there's going to be repercussions.
Yeah.
We've got to do that.
Well, it sounds like most of those organizations you talked about, because I've talked to Sheriff Mark Lamb and Sheriff Daniels and all these guys that you know very well.
Right.
And it sounds like they're on board with that kind of program.
They are, and I think that they're more than willing to work with a leader that's willing to put it all together. And we've also, when I met with the CBP folks, they basically said, Matt, we don't understand why they're not enforcing still the parts of 1070 that are still in place, Senate Bill 1070. So all of these things can come together to allow us, I think, to do a lot more than we're doing right now to provide the deterrent. And even if we don't have the physical barrier, the wall that's up yet, we can provide a barrier of law enforcement.
And if federal doesn't allow us to do that, you're saying you're going to try to come up with a plan for state land to be put the wall on, and
yes,
then
sir.
Reservations,
yes,
working
sir.
with the
whatever we have to do, and negotiating with the tribes. Tribes always want something. Just got to figure out what it is they want the most, so we can figure out how to work with them on their lands. So, yeah, I mean, that is going to be my top priority for the first 100 days, is to figure out how we're going to go ahead and start enforcing our border in Arizona.
Okay. That's awesome. Well, I think that brings in, we were talking about law enforcement earlier, and what are some of the big issues you see in law enforcement now that
a lot of them,
a lot of us and organizations in the state can actually help with and spread that message?
So, number one, recruiting is down significantly for law enforcement all over the state. Some agencies down as much as 30%.
And that's all over the nation because
it's a big deal. And it's because of what's happened, during Black Lives Matter and cities and leaders talking about defunding the police and talking about taking away officers' qualified immunity and talking about creating these citizen review boards to determine if it's a good shoot or not, that don't have any law enforcement people like the city of Phoenix has right now, which is a joke.
Doesn't the mayor wear is it the mayor that wears a T-shirt?
The vice mayor.
The vice mayor wears a T-shirt that says defund the police.
Yes. And so
I find that almost treasonous.
So as governor, I put out a very detailed policy paper on law enforcement. Frank Milstead, former head of DPS, is heading up my law enforcement advisory committee for my campaign, and he's a close advisor of mine, going forward too. But it includes a lot of things. Number one, when it comes to qualified immunity, if a city even breathes about taking away qualified immunity, some of them are. We have 3 cities in Arizona that very easily could do that: Phoenix, Tucson, Flagstaff. Mm-hmm. Very liberal, progressive ideas like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren at AOC. And I worry very, very much that they could move in that direction, or taking away funding for the police, or instituting these citizen review boards. So we've got to create some laws that make it painful for them if they do that. The state provides a lot of money, literally hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions, for state shared revenues. And my feeling would be that we need to pass laws to say, if you pass these kinds of laws, you lose a portion of your shared revenues. Make it hurt.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm interested in pushing through, because these things could happen. Now, City of Phoenix, which is being investigated by DOJ, which again to me is another joke. The person that they put in charge, this Merrick Garland, who's the Attorney General of the U.S., assigned a woman named Kristen Clark. Go Google her. Mm-hmm. She wrote a piece, an op-ed a year ago saying defund the police. This is the lead investigator from the AG on the City of Phoenix. What do you think they have in mind?
Of course. So
my point is, we've got to have a governor that's going to stand up and say, you're not doing that in my state. I mean, we've got to get confrontational, I believe, with these folks that are trying to, or when Merrick Garland talks, this is another issue. It's not necessarily law enforcement, but Merrick Garland says that I'm going to put FBI agents out to investigate parents as domestic terrorists when they come and testify at school board meetings. Not in my state.
Yeah, it's
not going to happen. No. And if we have to post National Guard at the school board meetings to make sure that you FBI people aren't coming in investigating our parents, then we'll do so.
Okay.
We will do whatever we have to do to make sure that Arizona is Arizona.
And I think that would reinstill the confidence in law enforcement officers right now, because, I mean, we've had a mass exodus in the state.
Big time. I think that more than anything, just knowing that there's a person on the 9th floor leading this state that has their backs. And I've worked around law enforcement my whole life. Some of my closest friends have been cops, and I would do anything to help them.
That's a big why for me, and to ask you is because I know, of course, a lot of friends of mine in law enforcement here, because I was in law enforcement, don't have that confidence that somebody's on the
And rightly so. I think that they worry because they've seen what's happened, within these city councils, and the goofball that's the vice mayor of Phoenix wears a T-shirt that says defund the police. And I think that, and why the media doesn't just come out and say, what kind of idiot is that?
Well, I think there needs to be like I'm trying to think of an example. Like if I was, what if a general came out and said defund the military,
right?
Or the Secretary of Defense said, hey, defund the military. It's kind of like that. That's not how. That doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't build confidence
to the reasonable person. So the people that are thinking that's an okay thing are not reasonable in our minds,
right?
And then now you have more law enforcement officers leaving. Recruiting is going down,
right? And it's totally understandable. I mean, one of the things that concerns me more than anything, and it could happen, this idea of taking away qualified immunity from an officer. The last thing I want an officer thinking about when they're making that split-second decision between life and death is whether or not they're going to be sued personally.
Which is on their minds all the time, I can tell you from being on the street.
I know that, and we got to change that dynamic, because otherwise we're going to stop getting good cops, and the recruiting is going to get even tougher. But the second thing is our neighborhoods are going to be less safe.
That's right. Yeah, and that's the ultimate goal in law enforcement. I try to tell everybody is it's public safety. That's
Correct.
what it is. That's
Right.
the ultimate goal. And
My,
so always come
my
back to
ultimate
that.
goal in law enforcement is the cop comes home safe at the end of the day to his family. That's my ultimate goal.
Yeah, and as a training company, we hear that a lot. Like cops will have that as a catchphrase. Like our job is to go home to our families at night.
Right.
And I want, and if you are a law enforcement officer out there listening, I want people to realize that your job is not, it is not to go home to your family at night. Your job is to do a good job at your job.
Do a
And
good
then
job
the
at your job
byproduct-
and come home to your family.
The byproduct of doing
Right,
a good
that's
job at
right.
your job is go home to your family.
No,
night.
that's right.
But a lot of guys will put that first, and they'll put pictures of their family up on the dash, and I think that's a very dangerous thing.
Well, with that, I mean, if your idea then is to run away from trouble, if it leads you to that, then that you're right. But ultimately, for a good cop that is doing their job, I want to make sure.
You want them to go home.
I want them to go home
And so you're
safe,
gonna
and I
create-
want them to know that I have their backs.
Yeah,
That
that's what they do.
yes, of course, I want you to protect and serve, and I want to make sure that you're out there making our streets safe and you're doing the right thing. But I also want to make sure that you know that when you do the right thing and you protect your partner, you protect the public, that you got a governor that's going to stand behind you on that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think I say, to do a good job at your job, which is the hardest part. And as you know, in my world, that's what we're trying to do. Like we were just talking about upstairs in the simulation training, people don't want to take advantage of that. So it's preventing them from doing a better job. So they may not go home to their families tonight because they are underfunded. They are undertrained. They don't know how to be resourceful when they're lacking resources. And that's what we'd love to come in and help these guys understand. And we need somebody to back them.
And what you showed me upstairs, I mean, what a great opportunity for teaching officers that muscle memory for when they get into a situation where they have to go in and save lives and protect lives and not come home in a body bag. Yeah. That kind of training that you guys have here is amazing. And I'm so glad that you opened my eyes to this because, we today have more tools than we've ever had before because of technology. And we should be using everything that we got to make sure that they get the absolute best training they can.
Yeah, that's good. Well, they need that backing. They need that support as well. I think last thing that I have, because of just time here for you, and I know you're a busy guy, and I appreciate you coming out.
You bet.
Let's talk about some current stuff going on. Biden, we mentioned that a little bit. You always say Jimmy Carter 2.0. I'm curious on your thoughts there.
Well, I've said this kind of tongue in cheek, but it's really true. The only guy smiling about Joe Biden's presidency is Jimmy Carter, because now he won't go down as the worst president in the last 50 years.
That makes sense. Now you also, I know you with your upbringing, you did a mission to China.
Yeah,
right?
Taiwan.
Okay,
Very different.
So very different.
Very
Everybody
different.
needs to understand that.
Taiwan hates China probably more than we do.
That's right.
Because
That's
they're always under the threat that China is going to come in and attack them and take over their country.
And I know there's some controversy there, and I think it's an opportunity for people to understand that have when your name comes up in circles, like, well, wait, doesn't he have ties with China? I'm like, I don't know. Let's ask him.
I don't have any ties with China.
You speak Mandarin.
I speak Mandarin Chinese, and when I was back in Congress, I chaired this subcommittee on Asia Pacific for Foreign Affairs Committee, and our DOD and our intelligence guys were always telling me we don't have anywhere close to the number of Mandarin speakers that we need, so that we can stay on top of them and know what they're up to. Because as you know, you keep your friends close, but your enemies closer, and you know exactly what they're up to. And we don't have as many Russian speakers as we need. We don't have as many Farsi speakers as we need. That's a constant need. So
both my boys speak Mandarin. So
do they?
Yeah,
okay.
Just in case you're.
Well, good. And it's a great
need that.
And it's a great thing. We need that. I mean, we need to know what our enemy's up to. So where this all comes from is when I came over to ASU, they had a program for like 10 years before I got there called the Confucius Institute.
That's right.
And it was a program where they taught kids, mostly in the K-12 schools, how to speak Mandarin and about Chinese culture. And they brought teachers over professors over from Chinese universities. And when I first came to ASU, I was at a conference in Washington, D.C., and somebody asked me a question about it, and I said very positive things because I think learning Mandarin is a good thing. I didn't know a lot about that specific program, but learning Mandarin to me was a good thing. So there was an AP reporter there, and they wrote a story about some of the positive things that I said, and it's kind of come back to haunt me, and that's what some of my opponents are using against me. But ultimately, the more and more that I learned about the Confucius Institute, there were concerning things that were raised before me, mostly about academic freedom. I don't think there was some real great opportunities for espionage going on there, but the academic freedom was a real issue. And ultimately, I recommended to the president of ASU that they shut it down, and they did. That was 2 years ago.
Oh, so it's done.
It's done. No, doesn't even exist anymore. There are still about 50 of them in the country at different universities, so they still exist, but they don't exist in Arizona. I called my counterpart at U of A and recommended that they close theirs down too, and they closed theirs down not long after ASU did.
That's smart.
So they don't exist anywhere in the state anymore.
Yeah, because I think there's a perception that, well, maybe the Chinese are using that as a way to influence their agenda into American campuses or something.
I think that's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, because
wouldn't put it past them.
And that's what the academic freedom thing is all about. That I had real concerns about the curriculum, where they wouldn't let you ever say anything positive about Taiwan, as an example, or the Dalai Lama, and just different things. And we basically said, look, if we can't have academic freedom, we're going to have to shut it down. Also, we had a Department of Defense Chinese language program that we cared about very much, and DOD said we'd rather you didn't have both. And so we're like, that was an easy choice. We'll shut the other down.
And I know you're also really hard on I'm just kind of hearing about it, Chinese industry, if they come into the state or something like that. Am I on the right track here?
So if I will say this unequivocally, when I'm governor of Arizona, anybody tries to commit espionage, through China or any other country, I will make sure that they are punished to the nth degree. The other piece is I'm going to make sure that none of our state contractors have ties to China, because I don't want our tax dollars going into the pockets of the Chinese Communist Party. And so they're going to have to disclose any and all ties if you want to be a contractor of the state. I'm going to be the toughest guy you've ever seen when it comes to China, because I know that that is a country that has not good things in store for us.
Very dangerous. I agree.
And over the years, things have evolved a lot. Before Xi Jinping, who's the current president of China, they were headed in a different direction. They really were. A lot of their folks really wanted to move in a more positive situation with the West, back in the 90s. But Xi Jinping, kind of like Putin, declared himself the eternal leader of China. Before that, they had to change out every few years. And he said, no, I'm not doing that. And he's a bad dude. And he's trying like Putin's trying to get back to the evil empire, as Ronald Reagan called it. He wants to go back to the glory days. Xi Jinping is trying to take China back to the days of Mao, Chairman Mao, and the Cultural Revolution, and it's not a good thing.
Well, I think people
know that. So things have changed, and so our views have changed.
Yeah. I mean, he owns all of Africa, almost all of Central, South, Latin America.
It's scary. Through the Belt and Road Initiative, they've taken over more and more and more, and put a lot of money out there. And when I was the chairman of the subcommittee in Washington, we did lots of hearings about them creating on these islands in the South and the East China Seas, these military installations. And it's under this president, they have become a complete different regime, and we're right to be very, very wary of them. And nobody understands China in this state probably better than I do. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that we are wary and we are careful as we can be to make sure that they don't have the kind of influence that we don't want them to have in this state.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I appreciate you standing for that.
You betcha.
If you ever need any help with any of that stuff, let us know.
Well, your kids can help me brush up on mine, because it's gotten pretty rusty.
Yeah.
I don't get much chance to use it these days when I go into a Circle K and order a soda pop. I don't do that in Mandarin, but.
Yeah. Well, Matt, I appreciate you coming on today. I know you're a busy man, and I appreciate you letting our listeners hear what you're doing for the state of Arizona.
You bet.
I'm pretty excited about this. I think it's time for change to happen. Good, solid change. Good, strong men standing up and fighting for what we believe in, because that's we got to have a belief system.
Well, the last thing I want to say is that candidates say anything to get elected. How many times have we ever been lied to by a candidate? And I ask this when I speak to different groups, and everybody starts chuckling, like you are, because everybody's been lied to by somebody running for office. And then I ask the question, what is the best predictor of what somebody's going to do if they are running for office. And invariably, people shout out, well, their record. What have they done in the past? And I'm the only guy that's ever actually thrown votes up on the board that's running for governor of Arizona. I'm the only one with a proven record. And I think that's, given the place where we are today and how frightening things are, you don't want to roll the dice to hope that the person that's giving you all these talking points that they're given, maybe they're really well-trained in how to give talking points. You don't want a chance that they're a phony. Mm-hmm. You want the real deal, somebody that actually has not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. I believe I'm that guy.
Well, I appreciate you being authentic on that.
Thanks a lot.
I acknowledge you on that. Is there anywhere people can go to track you, follow you, help you with your campaign right now? Anything you want to say?
Please follow us on social media, and you can get to all my social media sites by going to my website. It's just mattsalmonforaz.com, MattSalmonforaz.com, and it's got my Twitter site there, my Facebook site, my Instagram site, and love people to follow us, and love volunteers that'll come in and help us make phone calls and go knock on doors and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And if you want to throw some bucks at me to help me get my face out there on TV, we'd appreciate that too.
Of course. Well, I think your strongest point, and also in society looks at it as the weakest point, is you're a politician. But I also feel that you're kind of a war fighter inside as well, and you're willing to fight a hard fight. And I'll tell you, we wish you the best of luck with that on your campaign trail.
Really appreciate it.
Look forward to calling you governor one day.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Matt.
This is a great
Appreciate
day.
you coming.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed that.
Good?
Thanks a ton. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.